Hello, Melissa. Um, Welcome to Liverpool, USA. This is a best friends podcast because we are best friends. And today we're talking about something that's been on my mind for no apparent reason and certainly has not been on everybody else's mind. And that is tipping.
I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about tipping because, to be honest, it's not really something that I think about that much. Like, I've thought about it
Mhm.
before, and like sometimes I'm like, this is a weird thing that we do in America, but
Yeah.
obviously you have something to say about it, so please.
Yeah, I do. Okay. Well, it's more of okay, I think I realized in the last I don't know, a couple of months, maybe like last like 6 months, I've really started to realize that in my head, forever, I thought everybody was tipping the same amount. I thought we all were doing the same thing. I thought we
Oh.
all understood what was going on. And I have learned that that is not the case. So I want to know what everybody else is thinking, what they were taught. I don't know. I'm just curious about it because I'm realizing, yeah, that what I perceived as the way tipping works is not necessarily the way that other people have perceived tipping in the US. And we're specifically talking about in the US. And we are going to talk a little bit about tipping in other countries as well, I think. But yeah, specifically in the US. So how much do you tip when you go out to a restaurant and you eat out? What percentage are you tipping usually?
I panic and ask Justin. That is
Okay.
consistently because growing up, I never had to worry about it because I was never paying because I was a child in my family. And so,
Mhm.
but how I grew up, and I don't know, like you said, it's something that I feel like people do have feelings about and can be
Mhm.
like, I don't know. But anyway, when I grew up, of course, going to restaurants, it's like no question, like you have to tip. It's like
Yeah.
when I was young, I might as well have just thought it was like a law, like you have to tip or something bad will happen. Like that's just how it
Yeah.
is at restaurants. But stuff like coffee places and stuff like
Mm.
that, um I think that I'm even trying to remember what I did like pre Justin because Justin honestly has like changed my mindset and my actions around tipping a lot actually because
Oh.
I think that growing up our mom like it was not like talked about too much. Like I feel like we weren't really like shown like, oh, this is exactly how tipping works and why we tip people and like how much you should tip people. Like maybe it was
Mhm.
mentioned every once in a while, but honestly it was something that if it was something like a coffee shop, and it has like that on the screen, where it's like, do you want, like do you want a tip, and it would just kind of be like a quietly hit no type of thing and then like move on. And
Mm.
which I know is like now um meeting like after being with Justin, he consistently every single time there is a place where you can tip, like especially coffee shops and stuff, he will. Like he makes a point to. And he doesn't tip like the lowest amount almost ever. He always does, like a little bit more. And so
Mhm.
now, and I still am like a little bit like I just kind of panic about math. So
Mm.
like sometimes I'll do like an automated thing, or a lot of the times when I get coffee or something, I try to have like a dollar bill and just throw like a dollar
Mhm.
bill. Justin, a lot of time, if he pays with cash, he'll take some amount of change. I'm sure he's doing fast math in his mind, but to me, it looks like he just takes a random amount of change and puts it in the tip jar. Um, but yeah, so I know that that is like a weird, and it feels weird to say that. And I was probably like this in college, which I absolutely hate to admit, which is that at places like coffee shops and stuff, I probably didn't tip that much because I just like didn't really think about it, and I've never had a job
Mhm.
where I would have tips, so like I don't
Mhm.
notice like to be on the other side of that. But
Mhm.
now, like I said, after being with Justin and kind of like figuring out a little bit more, I'm like, okay, I really should be tipping people. So that's
Okay.
like kind
Yeah.
of my long answer, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think this is exactly like the vibe of why I think talking about tipping is interesting, because I think it's so much like to do with how your parents tip and what they taught
Yeah.
you,
Mhm.
and whether they taught you how to tip, or like what, yeah, like how they told you how to do it. And then like, yeah, the friends you have and like the partners that you have and things like that, and how they influence you. Because it is sort of like a, oh, I don't want to be seen like not tipping good. And then it's also like, oh, but I also like, I don't know, there's like this moral thing that's like, oh yeah, I want to like tip this person who's like making my coffee or whatever because they deserve to have an extra dollar or something, I guess. I don't know. And at the same time like also not wanting to seem like a bad person for not tipping. There's like this weird like extra level of morality, I think, that is really interesting with
Yeah.
tipping culture.
Mhm.
But anyways, yeah, I my parents, um like I specifically remember every time we went out to dinner, my dad would pay the bill, and my dad would always tip 20% or more.
Okay. Yeah.
Always. And also every time we went to Starbucks, because we were a Starbucks family, because my dad and I would go to Starbucks like pretty much every Sunday. Because we would go to Starbucks and then we'd go to the grocery store as like just him and I. And every time we'd go to Starbucks, he would pay in cash and he would put money in the tip jar every time. And I don't think I like specifically would like pay attention to how much, but it's like,
Mhm.
I don't know, we got like two coffees and he would put some amount of money in a tip jar. So,
Yeah.
you know. And so it was definitely like tipping was like a normalized thing. It was like, oh yeah, you have to do it, and this is how much you would do. And I remember too, like my dad told me how he calculates the tip in his head when I was like probably like 10 or 11 or something.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah,
like, "Oh
my
yeah,
mom
you like
has a calculation. Like she's told it to me before.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just like double the first number and then you like move over the whatever."
I don't remember
Basically
it.
just
I'm
like a
gonna be
way to
honest. Yeah.
yeah.
I
It's
still
just
just
a way to
panic.
calculate like 20%,
Yeah.
um like quickly. But yeah, and so yeah, like that was sort of the way tipping was talked about like when I was growing up. And then yeah, once I like became an adult, I mean it's hard when you're, I think, like first becoming an adult and making your own purchases for the first time. Um because oftentimes you're doing that at a time where you also have no money and you're trying to like save every possible cent. And if something feels optional at all,
Mhm.
then you're like, "Oh, well I would love to like save a dollar to spend on something else if I don't have to spend it here." And I think like maybe a little bit I kind of thought that when I was like the brokest, of being like, "Oh, I can't afford to tip, so like I just won't because it is kind of optional." But I remember seeing some things like maybe online or just I don't know, just kind of like thinking about it a bit more, and like you know, people being like, "Oh, well if you can't afford to tip, then you can't afford to like go out." Like that's part
Yeah.
of the
That's like a little like more of the mindset that I'm at now. I'm like if I'm gonna buy a fun drink, then
Mhm.
like I'm also going to like it's just going to cost that amount and a tip. Like
Mhm.
that's like more of what my mindset is now. Um
Yeah.
but I mean I feel like we're kind of getting into this territory, but like a big thing that I'm thinking is because like yes, that's the way it is, but it's why? Like why?
Yeah.
Like why? Because have you ever had a job where you got tips? I don't think so, right? Have you?
No, no, I haven't.
Cuz I'm like is it that important? Like is it that like if you're behind the counter is it that weird if somebody doesn't tip, or is it like
Well,
does it depend on the job, or like,
yeah.
I don't really get it
So it
from the
definitely
other side.
depends.
Yeah.
And I would say so we also both grew up in Oregon.
Yeah.
And there if I'm pretty sure, and I will just double check this really quick. But I'm pretty sure in Oregon, there is not a tipped minimum wage, which means minimum wage is minimum wage is minimum wage. No matter what
Yes.
job you work, minimum wage is minimum wage. And then if you get tips on top of that, you get tips on top of that. But in other states, there's such thing as a tipped minimum wage, which
Yes.
means
I know what you're talking
you,
about. Yeah.
yeah, if you work a job that receives tips, then you can have a lower minimum wage, like $6 an hour
Yeah.
or something, and then the tips are what like make up to make you more like minimum wage or
Mhm.
something. And so if you don't get tips, if nobody tips you, then you don't make minimum wage.
Yeah. Yeah, which
Um
is like that is absolutely insane preposterous to me like as a concept. I like
yeah.
and maybe that's just like my immediate reaction, but maybe somebody can justify it to me. I don't know. I'm like, why? Why? Is
Um
like what's the deal with tipping?
yeah, I think tipping, from what I understand, like obviously, back in the day, tipping didn't really exist. Like
Oh yeah,
everybody
when did
just
it
made
even
money.
start to exist? These are the questions.
Yeah, so this is what
Yeah.
I've been like thinking about.
Yeah, okay, I get it
But
now.
like um yeah, but like so tipping, obviously didn't used to exist really. I mean maybe like here and there would be like, "Oh my god, you did so well. Like here, let me just like slip you an extra, little bit or
Yeah.
whatever."
There was a
But
handful of like just a few times that people tried to give me some money when I worked at Safeway as a courtesy clerk and I would like help them take their groceries to their car. Um but I
mhm.
never took it, which I'm such a just good person or whatever that I literally should have just like to be honest, I literally should have just taken it. Like literally
Yeah.
who's gonna care? But no, I genuinely didn't. I never accepted anybody's money because I wasn't supposed to. You know, I wasn't supposed to accept tips or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a law. I don't know, but yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't understand, but I'm sure
Well, I
that's
am
yeah.
I am learning from the internet now,
Yes.
live, that tipping was non-existent in the US before the Civil War. And then after the Civil War, Americans started visiting Europe, and tipping was happening in Europe, and wealthy people, like wealthy Americans that were going to Europe, were basically trying to like act European to be like really classy and fancy when they like came back to the US,
Oh.
because they were like, "Oh, the Europeans tip. Like we'll tip." And so then during Reconstruction after the Civil War, it was like a sign of like wealth to tip. It was
Huh.
like, "Oh, I'm tipping you because I'm so elite that
Hmm.
I can like tip." And so then it like became, yeah, it was
Man,
like a
so only
flex
the rich people
to
had
tip.
to do it, and now in this economy, everybody has to.
Yeah. Yeah. The and once again, wealthy Americans ruining everything for everybody.
That's so interesting that
Um
it's actually like an older custom than I would have thought it was. I was thinking along the lines of like, oh, credit scores didn't exist until not that long ago, you know, like that type of a thing.
yeah.
So maybe that's actually like a little bit surprising to me. I don't know. That's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure that like the uh like details of it and exactly how it works and the laws and everything around it have changed a lot since the beginning, but yeah, that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
And apparently tipping started in England in the 15th century.
Oh,
Um because the Tudors.
okay.
So anyways, yeah, so that's we can kind of expand on that later, but yeah, so I don't know, I think it's one of those things that like it started out as like a truly an extra, like truly like, because when you ask people, it's like, "Oh, like, what is a tip? Like what are you doing when you're tipping somebody?" It's like, "Oh, well, on top of the cost of the thing that I bought, I'm tipping extra because the service was excellent or something." It's supposed to be, in theory, this like extra thing because somebody did something extra for you.
Yeah.
And so I think like in our like cultural mind, it's still that.
Mm-hmm.
But in like reality, people are like not making minimum wage if you don't tip, or like, people, yeah, people's like other things, depend on you tipping well in a way that it shouldn't. And yeah, sort of the way, like, where does like 20% come from? Is 20% like an appropriate amount to tip somebody? Should you be tipping more? Should you be tipping less? Like, what actually makes sense, like, with logic? And I don't think that there is really an answer to that.
Yeah, I feel like that could be like a different answer for a lot of people. I know that like 20% is generally considered like good. Like that
Yeah.
is like how much people, like that is like an okay standard tip. Like I do like understand that much. I believe, at least for like, my perspective. And that is also like an interesting concept that about how, tips can reflect, like how extra someone did, like how above and beyond they went in your service or whatever. And how it's like, yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people still think that way. But also, like you were saying, I feel like a lot of younger people or certain demographics of people are just like, no, it's just what you do. Like, it's just what you do. It doesn't matter, how good of a job your server or whatever, did. Like, you just have to tip, And, I feel like I'm a little bit more that mindset. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe, maybe this is controversial, I don't know. And, um, I'm gonna sound like a lazy young person for saying this, but I don't really believe that people need to be going above and beyond every single day at their job. Like, they should be doing
No.
their job and then going home. That's what I do. And I don't
Yeah.
do like I don't drag my feet at my job, but I'm also not there to try to be like extra every day. Like I'm not about to do that.
Yeah.
I do my job well and I go home. And so I'm not expecting people to go above and beyond in order for me to give them a tip. I'm like, if I'm buying a coffee, I'm giving you like $1 or whatever. I just am. And you can be, like flattery, and you could be super nice, and you could like, just like make it a really good time for me, or you could just be like, okay, thanks.
Here's your
This
coffee.
is, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm whatever. Like,
Well, I think what's really interesting, I'm just sort of like bopping around on Google a
yeah.
little bit live, but
Yeah.
something that I think is very telling is I just Googled like Wikipedia tipping
Yeah.
gratuity. But the original, like the very like sort of origination of tipping culture as we like kind of know it today started as like a like master slave thing, where it's like the slaves got like a
Oh.
little something extra if they were like extra good.
Oh my god.
And so it's like I think that that is like very telling,
It
because
is.
that's kind of the vibe. It's like
Yeah.
it's the people with the money, it's the people with the power, sort of like expecting the people that are already working for them
Yeah.
to like do extra. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're already like, making my coffee, do a little dance too.
Yeah. And then like
And
I'll
it's
give
like,
you an
okay.
almond. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay. Like what,
It's like a
you
more
know.
for them than it is for the person getting the tip. It's like to make them
Yeah.
feel good about it, because they're like, "Oh, I guess I can afford to give you this almond because you did a little dance for me when you gave me my coffee," like type of a thing.
Exactly. Well, and like as I was saying, too, like the tipping in the US really started as like a way to flex. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't about the person receiving the tip getting more money. It was about the wealthy person being able to be seen as wealthy. It was like a status symbol to be like, I can afford to tip, you know? And yeah, I think that that's very telling about like how tipping culture exists in the US. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard because I think simultaneously I feel very strongly that like tipping culture is bad. Like we shouldn't
We shouldn't have
have
to
tipping
tip.
culture. Like
Yeah.
things should just cost
Yeah.
the amount that they cost with the labor that it costs to make them included.
Yeah.
And that labor should, that cost of labor should be at a living wage.
Yeah.
Like I just think that like, oh, if it costs, this much money to pay a barista to make coffee, then that's how much the coffee should cost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Without having to do this like extra little like thing.
Yeah. Now it's
But at the
so
same
ingrained in
time,
our culture that it's like if you took it
yeah,
away, oh my god, I don't even know, you know. Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty odd one cuz it's like, and it's also like there's only a select amount of places where you do tip and where it's like I was saying, when I worked as a courtesy clerk for Safeway, like where do you draw the line? Why don't you tip your cashiers? Like why don't you
yeah,
tip, like fast food restaurants don't have, or like a lot of them I don't think have
no,
like
they
tip
don't.
jars,
Yeah,
but it's like what's that, is there really that much of a difference between like Taco Bell and Starbucks other than the menu? Like they're kind of doing a similar thing, but why do
yeah,
one of them get tips and the other one doesn't? Like, where do you draw the line? I think it's like, I don't understand it, Like why do you get to
yeah,
tip people? I don't know what the laws are.
yeah, yeah. No, it's an interesting thing, and yeah, I don't know. I think at the same time that I think like tipping culture is kind of broken, I also think that like, well, we're here, so you have to tip.
Yeah,
It's like I'm not
exactly.
gonna like the way
Yeah,
to fix it is not to be like, I don't think tipping culture is good, so I
right.
won't tip. It's like, no, that doesn't
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
So it's like a weird that's kind of why I've been thinking about tipping a lot because I'm like, it's a weird system, but also we have to do it.
Yeah.
And, I also like believe really strongly that you need to be a good tipper. Like I think it's rude to like tip poorly. Um and yeah, like I think something that kind of made me I yeah, without naming like any revealing names, but like I went out to dinner with somebody and we split the bill and they didn't tip good. Like in fact they tipped like really bad.
Oh.
Um and like, there was no reason to do that.
Mhm.
You know. Um and I just like, you kind of like can kind of peek and like see what somebody else did, or whatever.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
even trying to be nosy, but I just like happened to see and it was kind of like, oh, and I found myself like judging this person and
Mhm.
being like, oh my god, like they're not the person I thought they were, like they just tipped like so badly for no reason.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, why do I think this?
Yeah. And then,
And
like,
that's
do
what led me
they
down this
like
rabbit
maybe
hole.
they think it, however much they were tipping was like fine.
It was like fine.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I don't think that there's a world in which they think that because it was like literally like a zero tip. Like it was like a no
Oh.
tip situation.
Well then why tip at all?
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But and so this is the thing, and I saw this online recently too, which also has just added to my like spiral about tipping. Is I saw somebody like literally say like in a tweet or something like, "Oh yeah, when I experience bad service, I don't leave a zero tip. I leave a penny as a tip. That way it can't be an accident." Like they know it wasn't an accident that I like, oh, I
Oh.
just like didn't tip,
Oh.
but it's like they know that I'm tipping 1 cent, like, and I purposefully tipped that. And it's like,
Huh.
what?
Yeah.
Like,
Twitter's
I don't
God,
know.
Twitter's a way to remind you that literally the worst people exist and speak
Yeah,
English and put it on the internet. But
that's so true.
something like that, I mean, like related to that is even if I get bad service, I'm still gonna tip. And maybe
Yeah,
I would tip better if it was like exceptional service, but I wouldn't like tip bad if it wasn't good service. And which I don't think this has ever happened to me ever, but unless the person, like at a restaurant for example, unless the service was literally just like malicious, just
like
intentionally
insulting.
just like
Yeah,
insulting, then
yeah,
like maybe I wouldn't tip, or I would leave a small tip, but literally that never happens. I don't know. I mean, I feel like even if your service is bad, it's like maybe that person's just having a bad day because being working
yeah,
in a restaurant, being a server is a terrible
yeah.
job to have and
I
really
would
hard.
never like reasons I would not like lower my tip. Like, I would not lower my tip because the food came out slow. I would not lower
Yeah.
my tip because the waitress, like, forgot something. I, like, would not lower my tip because, like, something ended up being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they literally were like, no, like, we won't fix it, and, like, fuck
Yeah,
you, and,
yeah,
like,
right?
you know,
Unless
like,
it's
literally,
literally so intentionally insulting, then I'm not,
yeah.
yeah.
Then I would just be like, oh, it was an accident. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Have you
You
been?
know?
I'm sure that you have. I'm sure that like everybody has. But like at a restaurant with like older people, like parents or grandparents or whatever, and it's just like they're being weird about the service, And even if these older
Yeah.
people are like really nice and cool people and otherwise don't necessarily make you uncomfortable, or and it's like but they're being like weird about the service and it's like what, like literally they're
Yeah.
just like, why do you think this isn't about you? Like they're not like telling
Yeah.
the cook like, hey, make this, like take like 10 minutes longer to make this person's food specifically. That's not happening. Like why do you think you're
Yeah.
special?
And I do think that is a very telling, like, generational
Yeah.
divide, because I find that not just with, like, food service or whatever, but I feel like there is a lot more, like, self-centeredness
Yeah.
in some,
Or
like,
what's the word where you like feel like you deserve things?
entitlement.
Entitlement, yeah. And I've
Yeah.
met young entitled people too, don't get me wrong, but I
Yes.
feel like
Oh yeah.
generally like I notice it more in like older generations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, I don't know. I also, like, I will say I don't tip, like, a lot, like, more than 20%, like, usually. Like, I never tip really below, but I don't often tip a lot higher either. Like, it's kind of the same. Um, so I don't know how that stacks up to how everybody else is tipping. I can think
Mm.
of, like, one time in probably the last, like, year that I tipped, like, a lot.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like a lot, I don't know, but it was just like I tipped, like, I think, like, 50%.
Oh wow.
But that was like literally once, and it was like literally like a different, I don't know, it was
Yeah.
like kind of a special like
Okay.
situation, you know.
Yeah.
Um it's actually kind of a funny story. I went to this bar, and this, like, by myself, and this man was like hitting on me like a lot,
Oh no.
like, in a bad way.
Yeah.
And I kind of like looked at the bartender, and the bartender like looked at me, and they were just like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, no." And I was like, "Get this guy, like, away from me."
Oh
And
wow.
then they kicked that guy out because he was being
What?
like he was being like bad.
Oh,
He was being,
okay.
like, not
Yeah,
okay.
like not just to you.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
not just like hitting on me, but, like, you know, being like creepy.
Uh
And they kicked him out, and then I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna tip you, like, a lot as you just, like, saved."
yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah,
anyways,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's like the only time I've, like, tipped more, and that's not like because of the, that was like a different thing, you know.
Mm.
But anyways, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, I just always tip 20%, like, kind of always.
Yeah. I feel like I
But
need to get better about, cuz I'm also like thinking now of like my tipping history, but I feel like there's been
yeah,
a couple times in like the past where I've bought something that, had like a tip, and I'll like, you know, put one in, and sometimes I just panic. I don't know, like I can literally take out my phone if I want and use a calculator, but I don't.
yeah,
And I'll panic and I'll just like do a little like round up deal or like whatever, just add like a weird arbitrary amount. And I'll like tell Justin about it later or whatever. I know that this has happened at least once where I like bought something and tipped, and then like was talking to Justin about it for whatever reason, like it just came up, and I'm like, oh, I like tipped this much or whatever, and it like wasn't a good tip, but I didn't know, and then I feel bad because I'm like, well, I didn't know what I was doing. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, you know?
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
yeah,
Also, too, like, it is important to, like, I guess sort of, like, recognize that, like, tipping is ridiculous. Like, this is kind of a ridiculous, like, little
yeah.
game that we are all playing. Have you ever seen any restaurants that don't like they don't have you tip. They just like there's like usually like a little sign or something and it says like, "Oh, we just like basically got rid of tipping and just like made everything cost a little bit more so that it just like evens out so you don't have to tip."
I don't think I've ever seen that. You have?
Yeah, I've seen a couple. I
Oh.
think it might be kind of a Seattle thing.
Oh, okay. Sounds like
Because
a
I've
like a
seen,
progressive thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like like, oh, we realized that like making our workers like fight for their life to like get
Yeah.
a tip that like maybe you're not going to give them is like not great. So we'll just make it cost this much, and if you can't pay it, then you don't get to buy it. You
Yeah.
know, and so they just kind of like eliminate the problem. So I've seen a couple places. I think in Seattle there might be somewhere in Bellingham that does that too, but I know for sure I've seen somewhere like that in Seattle.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I'm like, it's interesting to see that type of thing sort of pop up in the US as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I kind of like that concept. Although it sucks that no, that'll get too much in just talking about the economy. It just like
yeah,
sucks how expensive things are right now. Which, is
yeah,
also relevant to tipping because as stuff starts to cost more, it makes you go back like you were saying that mindset where you like, "Oh, well, if I could be saving $1 right now, then I want to be saving $1." Because it's like my coffee costs $1 more than it did 6 months ago type of thinking. So it just
yeah,
like it makes it like weirder. Yeah, like
yeah.
stuff already be costing so much.
I know. Yeah, no, it's a lot. It's a lot. I definitely feel for that. I mean, yeah, it's like it's hard, right? Because it's like, oh, you're putting like basically like the responsibility is on the consumer to pay this tip
hmm
to make sure that workers like get paid correctly and like whatever and that you know blah 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 whatever reason that there is that we need to make sure that we tip now, right? But it's like but also like it's not my fault that this costs this much money. It's not my
I
fault that
know.
we have to tip. And
I
it's like,
know, yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
so
Just like go
yeah,
back and forth. Yeah, it's so much. Um,
definitely.
so you said that we got it from Europe, but don't you not tip in Europe? Are you about to bring that up? Like England, it was
Yeah.
weird, right? Like,
So yeah, so there are places in Europe that you don't tip. And it is sort of just that model that we were just talking about that would be kind of ideal where it's like, oh, we just like calculated it better so that you
yeah,
don't have to
it's like
tip
in
and
the
it just like
price.
already like is yes, there's places in Europe that are like that. England, you do still tip in England, you just don't tip 20%. It's
Oh.
more like 10%.
Okay. I honestly like don't remember what I did when I was in England. Cuz my
Yeah.
my budget was super weird, my eating habits were super weird, everything was I remember that it was like wasn't it not as I mean, I could totally be wrong. Was it not as big of a deal if you didn't or I only
Uh,
remember like uh I don't know, maybe I never tipped in England. I honestly do not remember anymore. I probably did. I don't remember, but the only thing that I remember is when we got tattoos. We were like, do we tip the tattoo artists? And it was like oh, you don't have to, but like you can and it's like, well, do we or do we not? It was very like I remember being
yeah.
very confused.
Well, I think I remember, and this was kind of common in Hungary as well. Um, but the tip would be like 10, maybe like 12%, I don't know. But it would be automatically calculated and just added to your bill at the end.
Oh, okay. So that's probably what it
So it
was.
was
Cuz I
like
just
you
I didn't
you
have
didn't
to
come
think
up
about
with
it.
yeah, you didn't
Yeah.
come up with the tip, it was just there.
Mm.
So yeah, I do think that was a lot more common in the UK. And in Hungary, I think it was a bit more common. Hungary is like you have to tip, but not, it's still like 10%. But it's like you have to tip. Like if you don't tip,
Mm.
that means you're like basically like flipping them off when you leave,
Mhm.
like
Yeah. Especially if it's
um
just already on your bill. Like, what are you gonna do? Cross it out? That's like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, because like Hungary, there was less where it was like automatically included. So
Mm.
like at a different place, like if it wasn't automatically like included. If you didn't tip, that was like if you don't tip in the US.
Yeah.
But like the expected amount to tip was like less, I guess,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I also think that there's something about being an American in the UK or in Hungary, where as an American, you're definitely expected to tip because Americans tip. And so that's a little bit of an interesting, like, political thing, I think. I don't have much to say about that, but I do know that that is sort of the case. And yeah, I don't know. It's just it's interesting. I suppose I think the tipping that exists in the UK now is similar to the tipping that was going on in the 70s, is similar to the tipping that was going on, earlier. Whereas tipping in the US is like kind of this like unchecked like exponential growth where it's like, oh, in the 70s like a tip of 10% was considered good, and then in the in the 80s and 90s like 15% was considered good, and then now in the 2020s a 20% tip, and even like now you'll like go places and you'll see like the options are like 20%, 22%, and 25%, and so now like 20% is the minimum, and like more of like a 22 like to 25% tip is like becoming more common. And so I think it's interesting that like in the US it's just like, oh, the percentage is going up and up and up and up and up. Whereas in the UK it's staying like pretty steady at like 10%, which is like what it kind of has been for a very long time.
Yeah. Which if you're gonna do it, at least make it something like that where it makes at least a little bit more sense, Yeah. I think that makes a little bit more sense. Do you remember what it was like? Because I haven't been to any other foreign countries. I don't remember Canada. I went in high school. I probably didn't tip. I don't.
It's the same as the US.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Canada. Yeah.
And then, do you remember like France or like other places where you went? Like, do you remember how it was?
I feel like in France, if I remember correctly, France is one of the places that you don't really tip, or you don't have to.
Yeah.
And also, they're so mean to you that like you don't want to tip anyways.
Which is so funny. Like, you make me scared to go to France. And then Nicole had a good experience in France. I feel like people have mixed, and I know that some of it is just cultural behaviors that we can perceive as rude. And then I know that like a lot of it's probably valid. You probably did run into a lot of rude people, but it's like, should that be taken as like a thing that everybody should just expect? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that the person I was traveling with was, I would say like very visibly American. And I think that did not help us. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I still kind of want to go.
Say much else about that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like somewhere you shouldn't go, but I just
Well, now
so I
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say like now I'm gonna think about that extra, which I think I already would have before traveling to like foreign places, but I'm it's like definitely have to check that before you get there because I don't want to run into any I don't want to cause any issues, like not knowing, because I know that there are places out there where it's like offensive if you try to tip because it's like not what they do, I don't want to like offend anybody, Yeah,
it's an interesting like conundrum, I think. And question for you too, like, okay, so obviously we both know we tip in restaurants, we tip at like coffee shops. Do you tip like if somebody like at a hotel like grabs your bag from your car, do you tip them?
Have I ever had that happen before? I guess not. I mean, I don't remember the last time that happened. I guess, see, and it's stuff like that where it's like, how are you supposed to know unless somebody tells you? But, I don't know I don't think I ever have. And then also, was this also another Justin thing? I think this was a Justin thing that, and I don't know if my mom was and I just never paid attention, or if I like never tipped like the hotel cleaning staff, just like didn't know
Yeah.
that that was a thing that
My
you're supposed
parents
to
never
do.
did that. I don't think my parents know that they're supposed to do that.
Yeah, see, I'm like, how are you supposed to? And maybe it was Justin that did that. And I was like, oh, damn, yeah, there's even like a little envelope here, which I don't think, not all hotels have that, but some of them have like a little envelope that you can put, like gratuity in.
Hmm.
And so now that I know that, I'm going to think about it. And like, he's better about knowing that kind of stuff. I gotta ask him now how his parents raised him because he seems to, like, know more about that kind
Yeah,
of stuff. But yeah, you know what?
exactly.
Yeah, I don't, yeah.
Like, I think the way you were raised and taught to like tip is so interesting because everybody, and like we're all playing the same little game, but we all have like different rules that we were
Mm-hmm.
taught.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because yeah, like me and Abe, are mostly on the same page about tipping, but like there will be little things where it's like, oh, like one thing we'll do is when we go out to dinner and we like, you know, eat or whatever, we'll like get the bill and one of us will be like trying to, it's always kind of like a funny thing because we both have degrees in math and
Oh.
like the two of us trying to freaking figure out how much we tip. It's like
Yeah. That's
us being
funny.
like, wait, how much?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, sometimes we'll be like, oh, like how much would you tip? How much would I tip? Like, I don't know. And sometimes
Uh-huh.
it's like kind of mismatched and it's like
Oh.
mostly just because we both can't do mental math, but like, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just an interesting thing to think about and like, yeah, I don't know. Also, Abe has made tips
Mm.
before. So
Mm-hmm.
he like has sort of a different perspective on it too, just like from being a guy who received tips. And yeah, I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. I've been thinking about it a lot. Basically I don't have any like conclusions, just it's a weird thing that we all do, but also
Yeah.
we have to do it and I find myself judging people who don't do it good. So it's like, oh, I think it's bad, and also I'm going to judge you if
Yeah. Yeah,
you
but you're
don't
not
tip
gonna
good.
like ask
So.
that person because you're not quite that bold, Be like,
No, yeah,
oh, I
that's the
couldn't
other
help but
thing.
notice. Like, what's the thought process behind this?
Yes, well, because that's the thing. So like, if somebody like said something mean to a waitress, I would be like,
Mm.
why would you say that? I would
Mm-hmm.
be like, hey, that was like so mean. Why'd you say that? But if somebody like doesn't tip good, I'm gonna silently judge them, but I'm not gonna be like, why didn't you tip that waitress good?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know why that's different, but also I kind of do know why it's different, I guess.
Mm. Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah, because
know.
like, how are
Anyways,
you supposed to? Because like, you were talking about, like the person that takes the luggage from your car or whatever. How are
hmm
people supposed to know who you can tip and who you should tip and who you shouldn't? I don't.
yeah.
Is there anything else I'm missing? Is there any? Is there any? Anyone else I
I
should be
don't.
tipping that I'm not tipping?
I know it's common to tip like a cab driver if you're
Oh.
traveling and you go on like any kind of like tour or like
Mm.
anything like that that's like guided by somebody
Oh,
or
okay.
like
Yeah, I
you
don't
go
think
on a
I've ever
boat.
done that, so that's like good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you go on a boat and you tip the boat driver, if you, I don't know, things like that.
Yeah, okay.
But you don't tip airline staff, so like that's not the
Oh,
same.
yeah. Yeah.
So like I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird. Except for that one taxi driver in Manchester. He was not getting any more of our money.
No,
Do you
he
remember
took us
that?
for,
Yeah.
yeah, he took us for all we were
That's the
worth.
last that was the last time I was in a taxi, I think. Yeah.
That's the last time you were in a taxi?
Yeah. I mean, Uber exists now.
Oh,
So
okay,
why
you're
would I
not
ever
counting
take a
Uber.
taxi? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. I took a taxi in Iceland,
Oh,
but
okay. Do they have Uber in Iceland? Does it made it there
I
yet?
don't think so. I don't think
Yeah.
they do.
Okay.
I think that's why we took a taxi.
Yeah. I'm
I
like
can't
afraid of
remember how much
taxis
we tipped
now
in.
because of that. Oh yeah, in Iceland?
I don't remember. I think we
Oh.
looked at. I remember us looking it up before we went.
Mm.
Tipping isn't mandatory or customary in Iceland, but is always appreciated.
Oh.
The standard rate
See, when people say stuff like that, it's like, okay, well, am I tipping or not? Like, they say that. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's okay if you don't. Is it really, though? Like, is it really? You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
that's.
yeah, it says if you're doing something like touristy, like if you're going on like a tour or like like doing like at a hotel or something like that, then you should still tip because
Okay.
it's like
Yeah.
international, I guess. But if you're just like going to a restaurant, and I think that's what I remember we like looked it up before we went, but
Yeah. Well, now I gotta
yeah, I
put.
don't know.
Gotta make sure that we have a separate envelope for tip money in our budget for our honeymoon now.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah,
thanks for that.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I've been talking about it kind of nonstop with a lot of people, so I thought you should also be
Yeah,
subjected.
okay. Okay. Yeah. No, it was a good subject. It was like a very different subject to talk about, so I was very curious, and I like doing that. I like picking things that are like what other podcasts are talking about tipping culture, you know? So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's very
yeah. I
interesting.
guess I guess I just had a lot to say, but yeah.
Yeah.
Tip, but also tipping stupid.
Yeah, but still do it. Yeah.
But yeah, and I'll judge you if you don't.
Yeah. but
But also,
but it's weird and lame, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah. Thanks for chatting with me about tipping.
Yeah.
And I guess we can kind of wrap it up there.
Yeah, for sure. Unless you have
Yeah.
anything else
So
big to say, but I think that's pretty much it.
no, that's kind of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Till next time. I love you.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye.